Hello everybody and welcome to today's webinar. My apologies for that slightly delayed start there. We were just having a couple of last second technical issues, but hopefully you're with us and you can hear us fine okay now for the rest of the webinar. So thanks for joining us. As I say, today's webinar is all about ingredients for a successful customer service strategy. Our guest presenter today is Martin Hill-Wilson. Martin runs an organisation called Brain Food, and he's been presenting this particular material all over the UK and most recently in Europe as well. And it's usually a one-day masterclass run with Zendesk. So we're really fortunate today that Martin's able to join us and give us sort of a condensed version, if you like, of this material. And if you have any questions for Martin throughout, just post them using your webinar panel and we'll come to those at the end. And I think there's a couple of polls as well included, so please do take part in those. That would be really great. So I think we can welcome Martin now. Hi, Martin.
Hello. Good afternoon, everybody.
Hi. So thanks again for joining us today. Sorry about that glitch at the beginning, but we're all ready to go now.
Very good. Okay, so let's start off. Welcome everybody. Going to talk through some of the key principles on how to design service strategy, and I'm going to take you through a framework. But first of all, I thought I'd get everybody involved with a quick poll and find out what your focus is at this particular point in time. Hopefully I've given you some relevant options here, but I'd like you to tell us what's your top priority this year for improving your digital customer service. Is it mobile? Is it focusing upon intelligent assistants? You might know those as chatbots or whatever, i.e. the self-service part. Is it trying to make sure that you get the balance between voice, text and video for omni-channel? Are you focusing on CRM or are you focusing on kind of proactive communication to customers, in other words, getting ahead of their requirements? So which of those is most important at the moment? Just pick the top one if you will do, and then we will see what the point of focus is for this particular group today. It'll be interesting to see what you choose. I was doing this recently actually, and I think the top one, if I remember, actually I'll have to wait, let's not prejudice the outcome. So when we're ready, Zoe, have we got most folks who have got their points in there?
Just click.
All right, well let's see if we can see the answers to that.
So here we've got, so the first one, mobile customer service, was 11%.
Right.
Intelligent assistants and bots is 18%.
Okay.
Omni-channel 11%.
Yeah.
CRM 14%, and proactive service was 46%.
Ah, interesting. So that's the clear winner, is it?
Yeah.
So that again is very much part of digital customer service. I think the idea that we're having to get into real time with our customers and we're having to respond to an increasingly impatient customer. Good. Well, I've got a section on that, by the way, later on this presentation. So hopefully that will talk to those of you who are currently focused on that. Thank you very much for the feedback on that. Let's get on with it. First idea I want to talk about, really just to pick up that theme, is increasingly, obviously, customers are changing behavior. And one of the tricks of doing effective engagement strategy is to understand where people are at in terms of their preferences for communication and where they are headed to. And so this section is all about trying to track that in a much more organized way. So the key question is, do you know how fast your customers are adopting new digital behavior? And the good thing is that there is a lot of information available within the public domain if you're prepared to focus on that and trap it and learn from it. And I just want to give you a few tasters of that, particularly in a UK context, by the way. It's pretty easy. We're pretty rich and blessed really in terms of that data set. So here's one in no particular order, but again, talking about, there's you at your desk, typically multitasking with all the different devices. What's the typical behaviors? A good piece of research done about 18 months ago by Yahoo. It was a global study, but it's broken down by geographies, talking about how people tend to flip device to device. And clearly here you can see, in terms of how we engage with organizations, we're flipping between smartphone and desktop or laptop probably at the end of the day. Again, that raises an interesting thing because clearly the experience of delivering service over a smartphone is quite different and distinctive from a desktop. Are you aware of that? Are you able to cater to that particular requirement? Here's an interesting piece of research, again from a global study, this time just focused on the UK. Deloitte's showing that over a pretty short space of time, just 4 years, the percentage of those of us who are using our smartphones pretty much for everything bar phone, bar telephony, bar voice, has moved from just 4% of people, typically in a given week, would never use the telephony, to now almost a third. Again, a lot of us instinctively know that. We're in a text-oriented environment at this particular point, and actually we're not using our smartphones for that. But just if you think that digital equals text, again, one of the things you've got to remember in life, the advent of voice-based interface, things like Alexa, things like Google Home, again is bringing voice back into the mix. So, that pattern may well look different in another period of time. We might see voice becoming more popular again. The rise of self-serve, no surprise here, just a little example from booking.com. Again, the need to be available to customers in a 24/7 context. How are you providing that? And looking really at the use of smartphone, it's interesting that it's not just a device, it's also a device that has changed our behavior, changed our mindsets, changed our expectations, but it's got to be available in any appropriate device in context at my precise moment of need. Now that's extremely challenging from a customer service perspective to be able to meet that particular expectation. So availability in terms of however and whenever, again, that's growing. No surprise, we therefore see people saying, 50% of customers are saying, do you know what, actually you need to be available 24/7 for us. That would be my expectation. And even if the audience, which you can see in this particular sample, is slightly light in terms of the 51 to 61 plus age group, nonetheless, you've still got people, from the youngest cohort up to 50 saying half of that group expects you to be available 24/7, which pretty much says you need to get into the self-service capability and be effective at that, because not many organizations are going to take the alternative, which is to provide shifts throughout a 24/7 pattern. So, very quick look at the public domain material. You augment that with your own research. Typical questions, for example, to customers are, what are your preferred channels? How do you like to engage with us? Do you use smartphone when you're talking to us? All those kinds of things that help us to make those be more informed, basically, about customer preferences. In terms of using that research, it's quite handy to group that. You might well find that people have got a more conservative set of behaviors. Some people might have more progressive. You can group them and segment them according to that. And application-wise, that then helps you to make much more informed decisions. Should you be involved in building a mobile service app right now? Certainly your IT team is going to probably want you to do that. They're going to love the idea of being able to build one of those things for you. But the point is that appropriate at this particular point in time? Do your customers really require that? Have you got enough people out there right now that would be on Messenger, some kind of platform, so you could do bot-driven self-service? How strong is the demand for messaging? So again, the reason to do profiling is that you've got a much better handle on when to invest in those kind of new capabilities and those kind of new channels. And of course, because life keeps changing, you need to repeat that process of tracking those changes over time. And so if you agree with that, then it's a question of saying, do I plug that into my voice of the customer, my insight teams? Do I run it in a different kind of way? But I would argue it's an important capability. Moving on, assuming that you've got that up and running, you then want to be focusing upon what it takes to craft an effective engagement strategy. And again, this is kind of handy to look at the overview of what you're trying to achieve. The majority of customer service still, certainly in the UK, is about 3/4 based live. In other words, it's either voice, it's either text, but it is assisted service, it's using a human being. And the much smaller percentage is still self-service or proactive. And interestingly, let's have a look to the future. What might it look like? It could look like that. It could be that live has been reduced to a much, 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 much smaller percentage because, humans are absolutely vital in the mix. They remain vital, but when should we be using them? And one of the suggestions I'm going to make to you later on is when it's emotional, when it's complex, when it's about making that relationship stronger, then humans are absolutely essential. However, for the rest of the time, do I need to use a human in that way? And the answer should be no, not necessarily. Make it available to customers to consume as self-service. So it could well be that there's a very large transformation in your operating model if you actually get the optimum engagement mix right. So that all being said, what is the core choice that you're really offering customers? And at the end of the day, there's only really three forms of communication. There's voice, there's text, there's video, and it can be delivered assisted, or it can be delivered through self-serve or proactive. And as far as the self-service is concerned, as I said, that can be delivered to deliver this expectation of 24/7, whether it's education, information, or task completion. But when it's emotional, when it's complex, or when it matters to the relationship, it should remain live. And of course, what you're trying to do there is to find out what the balance. If you are doing self-service, then the other thing to remember is, of course, make it easy for customers to escalate to live assistance, because you never know when that's actually required. So, that being said, how should we be viewing and using live assistance, which traditionally has been pretty much the way in which we've delivered customer service? It's worth dwelling a little bit about live, and how it works and what it's useful for, and think about it in terms of bandwidth. Face-to-face is very expensive, but on the other hand, it is the best way of communication, because you're not only conveying information, you're also responding to that other person in terms of the body language, in terms of how you see them absorbing your communication and responding as a result of that. The only problem, of course, with face-to-face is that it's not very movable, it's not very adaptable, it's not very easy to make that point, that capability available digitally, for example. So therefore, what happens when you are trading off that in order to become more available digitally to customers? You've just got to think about that. So does it matter that you lose body language? Does it matter that you lose facial feedback? Does it matter, for example, that you lose tone of voice when you're no longer available by voice? And it is interesting, by the way, that text communication, which is currently, very strong, very prevalent, very popular, is a form of communication that is convenient, but also is not as rich as those other forms of communication. And it's no coincidence, for example, the rise of emojis is in direct proportion to our use of text. And what we're doing in that situation is trying to reinsert the emotional layer of communication back in by using emojis. So again, you can ask yourself, is it therefore a powerful way of communicating, for example, when we have got an emotional, a complex situation going on with customers? Maybe it's better to use voice, maybe it's better to use video. And when you start to think about this, it lends yourself to be able to describe the relative strengths of each channel. I mean, there is no silver bullet on this, there is no killer channel. It all depends upon the customer task and the situation. But you can easily say, as actually we're suggesting here, that video shouldn't be used just because technically it's now available, bandwidth is more plentiful, compression is more effective, therefore let's use video. That's exactly the wrong reason to use video. You use it when it fits the situation. And the picture that you might be able to see there is right in the background, actually on the right-hand side, bottom right-hand side, is somebody from Nationwide now who is providing advice to people who are in the process of buying a mortgage. And the great thing that the Nationwide team have done is got the benefit of having that now available as a centralized resource, so single place, all those advisors working together, but they pipe that into the local branch network, and they've worked very hard at harmonizing that central resource with the local resource, so that the overall customer journey of welcoming the customer in, sitting them down, having the discussion, deciding what mortgage is best for them, then do the paperwork typically and all the rest of the stuff, just works seamlessly as a journey. And the reason that they're using that person's expertise in a video context is where trust matters. In other words, it's a high-value sale. You are about to make a very important decision in your life, and you want to be able to have as much assurance as you can that you trust the advice that person's making. And because, as humans, we are very experienced right from early parts of our life to read the signals in someone's face in terms of can I trust them, it therefore works to use video in that particular context. I'd also argue that when face-to-face has been removed, as in the case with banking at the moment, for example, where we are beginning to reduce the amount of branch networks that have available, an app is not really an adequate substitute for what used to be a face-to-face relationship with your bank manager in a branch network. Video is the next best deal as far as that's concerned. Also things like hearing impaired, again, another good reason why video is very powerful in that situation. So you could use video ideally for high-value sales, for VIP services, for complaints, counselling if that's your particular thing. Voice, again, quite similar to video. It's very useful, as we said before, for complex emotional, when the relationship building matters. So examples of like problems, complaints, retention programs. And text, again, powerful, but again, best positioned for slightly simpler things that need to be done between you and the customer, hopefully ones that aren't particularly emotional. So explanations, simple advice, and still within digital, an excellent channel for escalation from self-service to live as it needs to be. So again, in terms of journey mapping and planning, that's ideally how you use your three types of communication. Right, that's live. That's some of the key principles as far as that's concerned. Let's move on now to self-service. Now, again, I don't know what your background is within the customer service space, but historically speaking, we've been discussing self-service for a good 20 years. So it's not as if we haven't recognized the need for it, but what has not been the case is the fact that it has been particularly successful from a customer experience point of view. And there's been two things that have gone the way. One is discoverability. In other words, I just can't find it. And secondly, when I do get to the right place, the answers themselves isn't necessarily the one I need. It's not adequate, it's not detailed enough, it's not, I don't know, complete in some respects. So we've underachieved as far as self-service is concerned. However, interestingly, we are now in the age of AI, in the age of artificial intelligence, and that has given birth to a much, much, much deeper capability around of intelligence assistants, which, by the way, are all rather confusingly called a whole bunch of things. So for the sake of this discussion, you can call them virtual advisors, virtual assistants, digital assistants, bots, chatbots, metabots, whatever you want to call all that stuff. It's essentially pretty much the same stuff. And in order to understand it, here's a pretty useful definition. It either augments, in other words, helps human to do the job, or it becomes a substitute for it because we don't need to use a person in that particular context. It's at the level now where I can understand your intent and the context of your question, which makes it a much more intelligent form of communication. In other words, it does not irritate customers as being stupid and dumb. It can do a number of things, anything from just giving information to executing a task, such as, I don't know, completing a complaint, helping you do onboarding, buying something in a shop. Because it has in the background what's called machine learning, which is just basically statistical patterning, it gets smarter with use over time because it absorbs the data, the input from customers, and therefore understands what's relevant, and it gets better over time. And finally, also, we are at the time where, certainly as far as speech is concerned, it's extremely fluent, and we can configure whether it's not it's speech or text in a natural conversational way, which again the customer finds makes the whole process of engagement in this way powerful, simple, and really quite attractive. Where are we in this? Well, a good piece of research from Opus, which is a research house down in San Francisco, focused on this particular market. We're beyond early adopter phase. We've got probably 1,200 companies out there in the world who have really got strong, powerful examples and use cases around of intelligent assistants. If you put in to the pot, by the way, just for market share point of view, all the bots that have been built on Facebook Messenger, for example, in the last 6 to 9 months, then that number is much, much larger than that. This is, if you want, the top end of the market that I'm talking about in terms of the 1,200. But nonetheless, it gives you an idea about where the market's going. Very, very importantly and very powerfully, one of the great things about this is that it just provides a single point of access across all of your data sources and indeed all your teams. You can use it very successfully for sales and marketing and customer service, and there's quite a lot of evidence from the changing customer behavior that, again, as the autonomous digital customer, we don't want to talk to people early on in our sales and purchasing journeys. So therefore, this self-service approach is increasingly attractive for both marketing and selling and servicing, which is an interesting point, by the way, to note. Here you can see some examples. The one on the left is Frank. Interesting. Frank is focused upon doing pretty important things like helping you swap out banks or swap out utilities. Hipmunk, as you can see, have aggregated a number of specialist services like travel, search, hotels, again, supplying that in a single interface. Big in the States, that one, by the way. The Verizon example is interesting insofar that you would not be doing something like paying a bill or having access to your personal portal unless you had been previously authenticated, and in this particular case, I think authenticated via biometrics. And Edward is, again, a nice little example of a pretty simple but very handy way of providing service. And if you go to the Radisson, any of the Radisson Blue hotels right now, I think there's one up at Heathrow, then Edward is available. You don't phone downstairs any longer. Edward is just available to tell you where the gym is, you know, how to get more shampoo, how to order this and this. And again, it's a new way of engagement. So they provide a single point of access for the customer, and therefore much easier. They do come in different flavors. You can have them as text, you can have them as voice-based, that's the Domino Pizza example. You can also have them in avatars, that's Amelia, famous for a whole number of reasons. So again, part of your decision-making is to decide which is the best version, most suitable to the task at hand. And they come in different platforms, you know, so this particular example is one that sits on a messaging platform. But again, mature organizations that are getting on with this are making themselves available wherever the customer needs to be. Historically, they've probably started from the desktop, they've started from the web, they've made that available as a mobile experience, possibly in-app. You're now finding people are extending that across potentially mobile apps. Potentially, I saw somebody yesterday, US government example, in fact, they were making themselves available on the iWatch, also on Apple TV and Fire TV, so getting there, and then finally making themselves available on Facebook messaging, and I think they were also going for Alexa this year as well. So again, different platforms, make yourself available wherever your customers actually are. Key design principle is that however, wherever you're going to be, remember that from the customer's perspective, whilst self-service is convenient, sometimes you just need assistance. You know, you might not feel very confident, you might feel surprised by the answer, you might feel frustrated by the situation. Whatever it is, make it easy to be able to escalate to live. And by the way, also make it easy from the point of view of that live assistant. So they don't want to have to ask the customer, what did you want to know today, sir or madam? You want to be able to pick up the thread as far as they've got and start from that particular point. And all good solutions are capable of providing that context and therefore allowing the blending of both live and self-serve to be a seamless experience from the customer's perspective. Here's a good example. Atom Bank, again, it's one of the new fintech organizations out there providing banking services in the UK. And again, if you just cast your eye down there, this is a typical customer journey where they had wanted to access live assistance as chat. However, the queue is 10 minutes and therefore the workflow says, do you know what, would you like to try to get your stuff done today using one of our virtual assistants, providing choice at that particular point. And the customer says, yes, that's great. And so they go into the routine of helping out as far as that's concerned. So again, very handy to be able to provide another way in which the customer can, in a timely way, receive service. Looking forward, there's different ways of looking at, you know, what's going to take place. But Gartner certainly are fairly bullish in their predictions, and they think that probably in the relatively short term, we are going to see a lot of our engagement with organizations flowing through this self-service without necessarily requiring a human intervention. I think that is definitely a potential target. It will differ according to sector. I mean, I was talking to a lady who was running an Alzheimer helpline. In their case, they are going to have a lot of emotional and complex and relationship-orientated engagement with their particular customers, particularly the people supporting people with that condition. So they are not likely to be enjoying that kind of statistic because they're still going to require very much a live form of assistance. But there are organizations, potentially that's the case. In fact, here's a good example. TicketBiz is an online platform providing buying and selling of tickets to anybody for any kind of event around the world. And again, as they have grown very quickly, they found the fact that their live assistants grew at a similar rate, and they wanted to deal with that problem. And they found that by providing an effective self-service capability, they diminished the requirement dramatically as far as live chat is concerned. And that kind of reduction, by the way, is not untypical. You can see anything from 50% and beyond, if indeed you are using live service in a way that really doesn't require human touch. So what does that tell us? It tells us that self-service really has the potential for a highly disruptive impact in terms of the way that we deliver service. As you can see on the left-hand side, there are some statistics from real live use cases, by the way, and these are not just vendor, these are people themselves from the organizations reporting back over the last 3 or 4 years the improvement in terms of cost to serve, in terms of availability, in terms of different channel uses. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's plenty more information there. So there's enough evidence to say that this kind of approach, powered by this kind of technology, really is allowing organizations to redefine how customer service functions, and it begs the question, what's your new operating model? Because people remain 80% of your service budget. And if you do manage to significantly change the dial over a given period of time, what does that do to your operating model? Finally, just want to have a quick chat about proactive. A lot of you were interested in that particular thing. And what can we do and organize ourselves around that? And the reason why I find it interesting is that, you know, there's an embedded culture within our customer service teams, particularly call centers, where working harder is the mindset as opposed to working smarter. You know, we double down on workforce management, we double down on all sorts of things like that. But sometimes it's just a good idea to step back and say, why is the customer actually choosing to talk to us? Why, you know, can we either get rid of the requirement, you know, through effort management, or maybe we can get ahead of the curve and talk to them before they need to talk to us. Now, that's not uncommon. You know, great delivery companies are going to proactively message us in terms of, you know, your parcels are due soon. Utility companies are going to tell us that there's an outage somewhere. Train companies are going to tell us when the train's about to leave. You know, it's not untypical to be informed in these kinds of ways, but is there much greater scope than those kind of fairly well-known examples? The mindset here is to anticipate knowing what customers need before they do. That's what we're really trying to do and achieve here. And you could argue that in a digital world, even if your SLA for live response is fantastic, you know, under 20 seconds or something, that in some respects just reacting of itself is too late. You know, that's not what the customers are expecting. Now, obviously, you can't magically anticipate everything from customers, but you can think about it in terms of reducing the effort. Incidentally, by the way, this is a great definition of what customer experience is built from: success, effort, and emotion, and the impact that that has upon my likelihood of repurchase and my likelihood to, you know, say positive things about you as a brand in terms of a net promoter score. So reducing effort is a sensible and powerful service strategy. So how do you do it? Well, there you go. There's you. You've done your customer journeys. You understand the process that the customer goes through across those journeys. You've mapped them. You've visualized them. You know what you're looking for. And the key question that you're trying to zone in on is to say this: is there any observable customer behavior that is consistently repeated over time? Because this is the only way this is going to work. So in other words, is there a pattern here? Do you notice that with all customers who onboard, something happens in terms of a series of questions they ask you, normally within about a month? Is there something that happens, again, when a customer has just, I don't know, finished a complaint or made an inquiry about this, that the other set of things then happen as a result of that? Because if you can see that pattern, why are you waiting for them before you respond to them? I'll give you a good example. Complaints management. Still, the insurance industry, you know, allows customers to progress check where their complaints are by phoning in. It's perfectly simple to proactively communicate that, because the process of making a decision on a complaint goes through a series of highly controlled and organized decision points. It's easy at each of those points to proactively message customers if you could be bothered to do that. So let me just give you a few things as ideas of how to get into the discussion. I do think in the fullness of time, by the way, that AI will make a big contribution to spotting those patterns. But right now, there is nothing to stop you getting your frontline teams, getting a workshop going and having these kinds of conversations. You know, is it safe? Is it allowed? Is it possible? The whole combination of when, where, how is something going to arrive, be collected, be fixed? You know, what can I do with my new so-and-so? What's going to happen now we've got to this stage in their workflow? What's going to happen next? Again, we can proactively communicate all those kinds of things. That service, if you think about it in sales, maybe these are slightly more familiar. People like Amazon are particularly articulate and competent around these sort of areas. You know, based on this, are you interested in that? Based on this, are you interested in so-and-so? I mean, it's an interesting point, by the way, that apparently if you harvest all of a consumer's wish list and also things they put into their basket but did not end up buying, and you offer a discount for that kind of group, you get something in the region of 70% conversion rates. You know, it's that popular. It's awesome at the end of the day. So anyway, there you go, as far as sales is concerned. And coming very quickly now to the end of that, I'd just like to ask you, reflecting on you know, what you're trying to achieve at this particular point in your service strategy, which are the things that you're finding toughest to crack? So just to explore those a little bit, a lot of people are trying to do, I don't know, outside in, becoming customer focused, but the toughest thing is the status quo within the business, the mindset. You know, a lot of people, for example, see customer service as the place where you sweep up the mess. Your ability to develop a much more improvement-orientated culture and get your other colleagues in the business to participate. It might be that you can't get budget because actually, you know, call centres are not strategic. They are unfortunate costs to serve. So the strategic value of service you're struggling with. No time to do any of that stuff. Very interesting, Martin, but I can't get through the day. It's too much operational stuff to, you know, absorb my time and energy. Silos, getting other people to participate. Can't do that easily. Again, we're stuck in that. Or even knowing where to start, there's just too much to do. It's a little bit overwhelming. So there you go. If you had to choose between those, which would be the one that resonates most with you in 2017? So that's the poll. I will just wait for a wee while till Zoe says we've got most of your answers. Are we about there, Zoe?
Yep, so we have just over 70% have answered the poll, so 75% have answered. So we'll close it off now, shall we?
Yeah,
then
good,
I can see the results here. So 30%, which is the highest response rate, say mindset, status quo.
Interesting. Yeah.
And then to work down in order, 26% say no time, too many operational challenges.
Yep.
And then silos, and then budget, and then knowing where to start is actually last. So that's probably a good thing.
Interesting. Okay, so the biggest thing to change is mindset. And I didn't ask the question, but is that mindset, your colleagues within service, or is that within the business as a whole? But interesting that's come up. And again, not surprising in some respects. That's often the biggest struggle that we still have within customer service. And I do think it's interesting because, you know, things have been, actually, if you have a 10 to 20 year perspective on this, it has been pretty standardized for a long time, and now we're in a world where things are changing very, very quickly. And coming back to the first topic that I talked about today, which is profiling the digital customer behavior, that's all part of gathering the evidence to show people that we're not in a status quo world at all. We're actually in a world where things are moving very, very quickly, and it's a heck of a race to keep up to speed with that customer's expectations. So doing that kind of work as part of your voice of the customer is an important thing. But anyway, thank you very much. Zoe, have we got any questions that have flowed through whilst I was presenting? I haven't really had a chance to check on the window there, but are there anything that anybody would like us to address briefly in the last couple of minutes? Yeah, so we have got a couple here. Also, as well, if anyone listening is thinking of posting a question or doesn't quite get to it in time, because we'll end the webinar in around about 3 or 4 minutes time, so we may not get to all of your questions. If we don't, however, Martin has kindly said that he's happy to answer those later on, and we can make a
a blog out of that as well.
Yeah, I'd be delighted.
Yeah, brilliant. So, okay, so first of all, should we ask customers what platforms they prefer in what kind of situations, or should we be braver and guide them to using what we know will kind of be best for them, if you like, and be best for the organisation?
Well, it is a balance at the end of the day, because the organisation needs to win, and so does the customer need to win. I haven't actually put the slide in there, but the interesting thing about customer behaviour, your behaviour as a consumer, is you're going to get what you want. We often find with IVR, for example, that people, put IVR in, people don't like it, they'll press 0, they'll still go to live. So my advice is you design according to what matters to the customer. You deliver and make available what they particularly want, and then that helps you meet what they require. So I think at the end of the day, yes, you do ask your customers preferred channels. I'm not a big fan of channel shift, I think, or digital first, because I don't think that works. However, if you do understand the journeys and you build solutions according to the customer priorities, then of course you're not going to have to nudge them in that kind of a way. So I think that you will find that actually you will also be more cost effective if you deliver journeys that work, because people, they will, generally speaking, stay within the tram lines, and they will be more effective as a result of that. And it's the real cost of business, by the way, in service is not so much the channels, it's the effectiveness. So it's the fact that still, on average, we've only got 70% first call resolution. Now, that's difficult to measure anyway, but it means at least most of us have an overhead of a further 30% where we're spending more money than we should be.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you about metrics, but I think that's a whole other topic, to be honest. There's something we might be able to blog about another time.
It is indeed, yes.
Yeah. So we have another listener question here from Julian,
sure.
asking, saying, I understand the drive towards automation and self-service as part of the digital customer strategy, but how does self-service build customer loyalty?
Great question.
Yeah.
Yeah, quick question, quick answer to that, and it's a very topical debate. I could have even rebadged today's conversation around a bit. When do you need to do human, when do you need to do automation? Because it's absolutely true, we've discovered that if there is no human involved, there is no reason for customers to be particularly connected to the brand, and you lose that stickiness, you lose that loyalty. So I think we're in an age where, having digitized our ability to engage with customers, and by the way, live voice, live video, live text needs to fit into that, the service design challenge becomes, when do you need to add in the human touch to those journeys? And the principle I'm saying is, when it's emotional, when it's complex, when it's about relationship building, that's when it's important to be available. And those are the points at which loyalty is generated, or the experience of loyalty is generated. On the other hand, if you're having to use humans because your processes are so bad and it makes customers feel, it's very difficult, it's very frustrating, that is also a world which we're trying to escape from, because in that context, customers just want low effort, convenience and availability whenever they want it. So the world is really all about making your customer journey seamless, and then reintroducing the human touch at the points where it matters from the customer's perspective.
Yeah, okay. Brilliant. Oh gosh, I can see more coming in, so apologies. As I said, we will get to those outside of this session, but I think for now we're going to run out of time, Martin. Obviously we could talk about this all day, but thank you so much for joining us today for the webinar.
Sure. Be delighted. And by the way, please do keep writing those questions. I will come back and answer them for you as far as that's concerned. So if you've got a question there, put it in. It's not going to be wasted, and we will make sure we reach out to you afterwards.
Absolutely.
So that you can see those answers.
Yeah,
right?
And what we'll also do is, I've had somebody asking for a repeat of one of the slides, but what we'll do is send around the recording of this. The whole session's been recorded, so you'll get an email tomorrow with a link to that, so you can go back and review it, any time, and have another look at all of those slides. So
many thanks.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Martin, and thanks everyone for listening.
My pleasure.
All the best.
Fantastic.
Thanks. Bye.